In less than 6 months, COVID-19 has racked havoc across the globe in ways that few living today have seen. The human toll, both in lost lives and livelihoods, has been devastating. There have been more than 400,000 deaths worldwide, millions are out of work, including more than 40 million in the US alone. Businesses are closed, and many of those jobs and businesses are not going to come back. But I do think there's reason to be optimistic. Since the beginning of the pandemic, I've been reading McKinsey and Company's really insightful, from my perspective, COVID-19 briefs. And the May 27th note was particularly encouraging. It included this line: "The world is turning from resilience to return." And they note that pent-up consumer demand is beginning to be released. Businesses are more confident, and that was backed up by data based on surveys and interviews. And still, we know this isn't over, as today's headline show. And if you haven't looked at your brokerage account today, I advise you don't. But there are reasons to be positive. While there are still unknowns, I can tell you with complete certainty that consumer behavior has changed, and business models must adapt or die. And digital transformation is now compulsory for businesses of all sizes. So the question becomes, how can businesses connect with physically remote customers in a meaningful way when they're not there, they're not in your store? Interactive, personalized engagement driven by data, content, and intelligent automation can help you make that connection. Successful transition to the new normal, according to McKinsey, requires companies to, quote, respond in three ways: digital excellence, safe and contactless engagement, and dynamic customer insights. And we're going to focus today's discussion on those dynamic customer insights in particular. Enterprises entering the economic recovery with a customer data foundation that supports digital transformation really have an edge. With that said, welcome to Mastering the Data-Driven Digital Economy. My name is Chaz Kilt. I work in product marketing and corporate communications at Reltio, and I'm really happy to be sharing the Zoom platform today with an expert who will put the present situation in context. And more importantly, through the use of use cases and data, she'll provide specific actions that you should take right now to prepare for the new way of conducting business. Cheryl Kingstone is a 20-year veteran of 451 Research, which as of December is now part of S&P Global Market Intelligence. She manages a team covering customer experience and commerce, and oversees, in her role as general manager, voice of the connected customer user landscape research. She also happens to be head of macroeconomic research at the firm, so her bona fides are very strong in this area. Prior to joining 451, Cheryl held multiple marketing roles at several technology companies, so she's been in the seats that many of us are in right now. And her professional accolades include being the first woman inducted into the CRM Magazine Hall of Fame. Thanks very much for being here, Cheryl. It's good to connect with you again.
Thank you. Yeah, really looking forward to today's topic.
Fantastic. The COVID-19 health crisis has really taken a financial and physical and a psychic toll on a lot of people. And while it appears that we're moving in the right direction and business and individuals are beginning to adapt, it seems that consumers, both businesses, in a B2B environment, and individuals, are approaching commerce much more differently than they did prior to the start of the pandemic. And you've done some really interesting research into the economic impact of the pandemic on consumers and businesses, both from a financial standpoint and a behavioral standpoint. So it seems like it would be a really good place to start with that very cool S&P slide that you've shared with us.
Yeah, that sounds great. Let me walk you through some of this interesting behavior. And what's amazing is how quickly things change, right? So this is constantly being updated. And the way we look at things is when you really start at the beginning, and when we were tracking a lot of the initial foundation, things happen so fast. In the beginning, the economic indicators were really strong. And so we're taking a look at things with respect to the virus progression. And so China announced their first death, and it continues to move forward. Then the pandemic and the global cases, and people sheltered at home. But what was really important is, what are we doing from the economic impact, and what happened to drive the stock market down and then change consumer behavior? So the virus and the economic projection really changed the way that we looked at a lot of the research. And so part of my background in macroeconomic was what happened. So even into February, 30% of consumers still intended to spend more. They were really positive, but by March, it spiraled down. And it really was halted primarily because of the pandemic over travel restrictions, social distancing took form, and stay-at-home orders drove record unemployment figures that fueled, as everyone knows, the plummet of consumer confidence. And we're still waiting for that reversal. We thought it was coming. And as of today, you know that there's going to be a second wave here. So what are we going to do for a lot of the scenario planning? Because as we take a look at the CX impact, there's historic damage that has really happened. And 75% of respondents say that they plan to spend next over the next 90 days. Retailers are filing for bankruptcy, and it's really not all doom and gloom, because we look at 80% of consumers, they've said that they've shifted their spend online. So that's really where we're starting to take a look at things like delivery app usage, and that's skyrocketed. Visa stated that spending for non-travel online spending surpassed some of the pre-pandemic stages here. And so there's a lot to really take into account when we talk about the devastating consequences. And so what's going to happen is businesses try to either adapt, pivot, or hibernate based on these new realities of social distancing. And part of that is really this digital experience and being able to shift. And so one of the things I really talked about here, I've used this slide before the pandemic, having the fact that emotion is the currency of experience. And this was important before the pandemic. It's important during the pandemic. It's going to be important after the pandemic. And that's what we have to take into account. How are we going to plan for the future? And connecting with the customers has just intensified in the age of COVID with sheltering in. So as I stated before, emotion for many years has been really important. And why is that important? It's because we're driving that emotional connection. And so experience, not products, will be the battleground of the future. We've been saying that for years, right? That hasn't changed. Improving the customer experience will always remain front and center, even amid any economic or socioeconomic, such as the coronavirus. And so the pandemic has accelerated the adoption of some of these critical technologies. A lot of it has to do with digital. A lot of it has to do with data and understanding the new data that has to be used to make sure that we're providing these differentiated experiences. And this is really important in both B2B and B2C. So data, which is what we're here to talk about, is really a pivotal role in really defining those moments of conversion.
Yeah, so, it's really an interesting, just to jump in for a second here.
Sure.
It's interesting that you talk about experience and emotion being the battleground of the future. It seems that there's going to be a big challenge in filling that gap, the physical distance between an organization, a company, and its customers. And so you're going to be touching on some use cases and ways that companies can do that through the course of today's discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. The use cases are important. The metrics to measure is important, and it really does drive all the data. And we're going to see that even later in the presentation. But one of the things I wanted to point out is why it's not all doom and gloom is because, 4 out of the 5 consumers have shifted their spend online. This is what I was saying earlier. Around 80% of the shoppers have shifted some of their spending from in-store to online. And then when we take a look at, they might be spending less, but ones that were already digitally enabled are still spending more. So that's the way that we're still looking at it. So what's important? What does this mean for you? It means that content and context, which are both very important to understand, are in high demand as businesses zero in on personalization. And so we're really seeking to understand how we can connect, how we can provide immersive experiences. And as you said in the opening, it really is relying on things like content and prescriptive insight and intelligent automation, but it's about driving those frictionless experiences. Even through this roller coaster, we might turn around and start spending more in store, but for all we know, that's going to shift back to digital when we do have a second and third wave. And so when we look at it, what's most important is to understand where our business is today and how have they been digitally enabled. So when we look at this slide, what you have to pay attention to is the ones that had half their income from online already now are behind the 8 ball. The ones that have more than half of them, like they're more digitally driven, are really able to shift. And so if you expect your organization's online sales to be higher due to the coronavirus, are the ones that were already digitally enabled. So the digital channels are what's most important. And so as normalcy returns, we expect this lesson to spark some further investment in a lot of these technologies as we're pivoting back and forth between in-store and online and align with partners. The key goal is just to remain relevant to the eyes of these consumers. And so we're really going to have to understand what that customer journey is going to look like in the future. And if we're only relying on what we've done in the past, it's going to be a hiccup because there's been significant disruption. And so it really is all about understanding the different business models and the long-term economics and the relationships of going direct to the consumer, having different loyalty and building exercises and retention exercises. And that's going to evolve into investments in a new stack. And so that's really what's most important.
Yeah, and you've built a business case for accelerating digital transformation. If for no other reason, we're seeing consumers, again, both business consumers and individuals, shifting their business to online, in large part, of course, because physical locations are closed down, people are isolating. But nonetheless, we look at this, I talked about digital transformation being compulsory. It's not optional at this point in time. One thing I wanted to stop and do just to level set with the audience is, in my opinion anyway, the term digital transformation is one of those terms that everybody's going to head nod and say they understand, when in fact, perspectives can really be different based on role, based on experience. So I think it'd be a really good place to start by understanding how you and 451 Research, how your team defines digital transformation, and then what we can expect in what 451 is called the new digital decade.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when we do take a look at a lot of this trends around digital transformation, so we've been tracking it for the decade, right? So it's not anything new. It's real, it's happening, and our data lends more insight to the transition. But it really is an inescapable truth that every business is becoming a digital business controlled by the software that they are investing in. So as businesses across the organization, all different departments are aligning around this digital culture, whether it's that work from home culture trying to meet the eyes of the customer, whether it's the online business trying to continue to sell and engage, the goal is going to be making sure that they remain in a digital environment. And so digital transformation, as we define it, is really the result of IT innovation that's aligned with and driven by a well-planned business strategy. And so it really is all about serving those customers, but it's also about making sure the employees have the right information at the right time. It could be partners, especially in a B2B sense, or when you're trying to get your products to market through the new forms of engagement. Supporting your continuous operations and improvement in business operation has become essential in the age of COVID. And this is a definition we had prior to COVID and prior to the pandemic. Disrupting your existing businesses and markets, my God, what have we learned from the mom and pop organization that could just died on the vine unless they went to digitally enable and get the information that was out there? And we're talking about bakeries that are now going online, and then new businesses and new business models. It really has changed everything. And so one of the things we like to do is understand where that shift is. And so when I said we've been following it, this is just a data point for you guys to understand that in 2016, only 29% of organizations had formal strategies and were actively digitizing their business processes and using new technologies. Now, if we shift to 2019, and we're in 2020 now, so we're tracking these numbers, but by the end of 2019, 52% were really already now in formal strategies. So we're calling those digital leaders or digitally driven organizations. The rest in the middle, they're learners. And then the ones that absolutely are clueless, they're pretty much the laggards. And so the coronavirus is changing the face of customer experiences, and it's really igniting dramatic shifts in consumer spending patterns, economic confidence, and trust. So more than ever, we have to understand what's going on with digital transformation. And technology today can ensure that businesses rise to the occasion. And if that 48% of the market is still formulating their plans, they're going to have a problem because they have a long way to go to meet reality. And COVID-19 has really been a wake-up call to a lot of these organizations that are trying to engage in more of these contextual experiences. And it really has become a pretty important inflection point. And one of the things I really want to talk about is we're all talking about metrics and we're all talking about money. And I can sit there and say it's really important to have a formal digital strategy, but what's even more important is the money you're leaving on the table. So what we've done at 451 is really try to, as much as we can, calculate the potential opportunity lost and the opportunity cost and the revenue that's been left on the table. And this is just a small part of the overall ability. And so if you're really here to come and take a look at metrics, as businesses are seeking to create these new immersive experiences, they're going to really rely very heavily on understanding what the new metrics are. They're going to make sure that they're reducing those customer effort scores and the friction points, because $93.2 billion in potentially lost sales is due to not purchasing an advertised product because it was too many steps required to find that product. How sad is that, right? That's $90 billion, another $90 billion because we're not really having the ability to have the curbside pickup now. If everything is buy online and pick up in store, well, that is absolutely essential in today's world. Then if we're only digital, what are we doing to replicate that personalized issue? And so in sales, $87 billion are influence and personalized offers that resulted in consumers that made a purchase they weren't otherwise making. These are impulse purchases. If you think about like walking by those windows, you can't do that today. So what are we doing to capitalize that experience online? And then around another 79 billion in potential lost sales due to abandoned shopping cart. And if we're only engaging online now and we're having difficulty completing the purchase, that's going to be a tremendous barrier. So it really is about putting digital tools to work in a transformative way to ensure that the data and the insights and key technologies connect the people with information and the processes. And then that's what leads to a better customer experience and ultimately that business growth. That's what's absolutely critical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what I really like about this, Cheryl, is certainly there are many challenges that enterprises, organizations face, and a lot of technology vendors will come at it. We can help you solve the problem. But I also love that you're focused on not just solving the immediate problem, and it's a big, hairy problem right now. We certainly admit that. But there is also the idea of opportunity, like what could be. And you've pointed out, and I imagine these numbers would be taken up if you were going to revisit these at the end of the day, in terms of if you don't make that digital transformation, you're going to leave even more than $350.5 billion on the table. There's a lot of opportunity out there. So it's not just about triage, it's about looking forward and preparing for growth.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, at times, I've actually calculated it to over 500. Right?
Wow.
What you're seeing here just is prettier on a slide deck, but the number can really be exponentially improved, especially when you're calculating all the different opportunities and reducing friction points, which we all know is out there. And so that's why we're seeing spend, right? So the question is, how do we solve this problem? If it's a technology problem, yes, a part of its strategy and part of its organization and part of its, dollars, but digital leaders are strategically shifting more of their budget dollars. And so this is what's important. If you're a digital laggard, remember the ones that had no formal digital transformation strategy? Look at the difference between today and to the future.
Wow.
Some of it's shifting, but not enough. Now look at what your digitally driven organization, those digital leaders, and the shift to 63% are shifting. It really comes down to keeping the lights on and not being able to really generate that revenue that we discussed on the prior slide, or shifting to new strategic applications that are going to drive engagement and really improve the overall customer experience. And that's what digitally driven organizations are doing. And what are they doing? They're looking at it across multiple departments, right? So these digital transformations need to look at it from a sales and customer service and marketing and even supply chain. I mean, we saw in the age of Amazon that they weren't immune to the problems they had primarily because of COVID. So we're going to start looking at automation from that standpoint. So organizations recognize the value of customer experience and they're really putting their dollars to it. So even in a recession, all businesses still need to focus on improving CX, reducing cost to serve, and making data-driven decisions. And so that's really where we take a look at what's going on with some of these new modern technologies. And one of the ones I really want to talk about first has to do with cloud, right? Because I'm talking about data, and I'm talking about digital experiences, but the role of cloud really does have a huge shift in the transformation of the future with a lot of the cloud native applications, the cloud infrastructure, and then having the data in the right format. So enterprises are adopting cloud solutions in a digital transformation initiatives because it's their fastest path a lot of times. It can be a shorter deployment than on-premise. It's a more modern architecture. You're able to scale up and scale down with very little infrastructure requirements, no special skills. So it really is all about that flexibility and scalability. But the other thing I want to point out in where we're trying to go today is business continuity, right? So while we're talking about the whole customer experience, let's not underestimate that customer service sometimes is work from home. And so what are we doing to make sure that all the employees have the right information at the right time and have that business continuity advantages? Well, that's really where cloud came in.
Right, right. Yeah, those are all great points, and obviously as the only player in our space to be born in the cloud and cloud native, it's certainly music to my ears. And we've seen that with our customers. We can get our customers up and running in as few as 90 days, much faster than with on-premises options. So it's really great to have you back that up. One area, and we don't want to go down too much of a rat hole, but like digital transformation, cloud I think is beginning to get more clarity, but there's also some opacity and some different interpretations of what true cloud is. And where I'm driving with this, Cheryl, is that we're a cloud native software as a service company. We're pure SaaS. Does that have any advantages over, say, a managed services provider who's running a version of their on-prem software in their data center and providing access to their clients through their data center?
Well, yes, it does. I mean, you have to be perfectly architected for something like that to work. A lot of times it's really not as modern as it needs to be, so it doesn't scale up and scale down. It has performance implications. I'm going to bring a personal story here. I told my husband to get all these cloud native technologies. All right, you can't only bring a person, lead a horse to water, is the saying, and he didn't. And he has to remote desktop in. And he's miserable, right? So it doesn't necessarily work when he's trying to get all his patient information. So the SaaS model really is the only way to make sure that you have the latest and greatest, that you really can have business continuity, that you can scale up, scale down, you can get the resources to the people that need it when they need it at the time that they need it. And you don't have to worry about a lot of the other upgrades and associated costs. And there's so much to do here, and we do have a lot of data at 451 around cloud and cloud options and what it means to be cloud native, whether that be an application that you're running in the stack, whether that be a data center, services, and where it's trying to go. So there's a lot here if anyone's looking to explore it. But what I can tell you is that 83% of digital leaders are really looking towards cloud in the future, and 59%, it's still very important, but they're not prioritizing it. And you see a lot of digital leaders out there really making the investment to be cloud first.
Right, and the reason, if we talk about in our discussions and having read your research, you talk about data as being foundational. Can you go into a little bit more about why you see this as the place to start your digital transformation? Because sometimes, you may find organizations that are thinking about customer data platforms first without tackling that data issue in advance.
Yeah, absolutely. So my background, as you know, was CRM, right? So CRM was supposed to be that omniscient view, and it never really did. It's not that anything was wrong with it. It just kept changing. The 360-degree view is one of this omnipotent multi-channel view that's constantly changing. And so the desire for that single view of the customer is always driving investment so that we deliver that optimal customer experience. It's what I call that coveted 360-degree consumer view that's really remained out of reach for many. And there's a variety of factors of why this has happened. But data, the foundation of the data, is what's absolutely important, because it's going to give you the insight into what's going on. And why we struggled with it is because a lot of times the new types of devices and approaches have changed over time. The bar has raised. And so now more than ever, we can't rely on older data or past data, because we have to understand what's going on in real time, because things are changing. So the ability to capture real-time information on that consumer behavior requires a lot of new approaches and strategies that really have to rethink the data architecture of where we're trying to go. So data remains a core battleground for creating those unified customer experiences, because what we're trying to do is the need to not only capture and unify these disparate data sources, but to effectively contextualize and operationalize information with critical insights across multiple different channels, right? With different stakeholders and different groups across different customer journeys. That's really what transformation is all about. But, oh, sorry. Yep, that's really what transformation is all about. My slide was a little bit here, but what I want to point out too is that when we look at it, the goal of a lot of this is improving the customer experience, right? So the customer experience is what digital-driven organizations are following on. Improving the customer experience is a main driver, but also if you do it right and you look at it through the lens of reducing operational costs, which is also just as important, those are the two most important factors. What I'm switching to here is that third factor. So it's really about managing that volume of data growth. And so if you focus on improving the customer experience, you make sure, especially in today's economy when capital is going to be difficult and we are focusing on reducing operational efficiencies, this has really gained, you know, it used to be important, then it wasn't important, and now it is important. It's about a balance. And so then after that, you have to measure and manage that growth, which is going to give you that competitive differentiation and your ability to innovate, and you have to manage risks. There's so much to do here, and it really is about that major innovation gap that emerges between digital leaders and ones that are not. And so what I want to point out here is if you're a digital laggard, you're putting operational cost first above the customer experience. That's not really the right decision. So when we balance these metrics, we want to make sure that it's a balance of, yes, let's improve the customer experience. And yeah, especially in today and era, we have to also reduce operational efficiencies, because we need to make sure that we're going to survive over the next year. But really, it's about a balance, and using data and analytics to gain the insight into those behaviors will help. And so that's really where the gap is coming into play here and moving to the future. And the tools that we've used in the past. And this is what's foundational, kind of, Chaz, is what you were getting at earlier that I want to point out, is we've had platforms in the past, right? We've had IT saying we have a platform, we've tried to consolidate it, we use the MDM and data warehousing, we have data visualization tools, we've even created data lakes and Hadoop, and then we've got the business saying that we've got different approaches. They have customer analytic tools, they have CDPs and CRM systems, but fundamentally we still have fragmented data. So modern platforms are doing more than just consolidating that single view. They're adding a layer of data governance and synthesis and identity that powers a dynamic graph. And it's that vision that goes a step further beyond what a lot of the technologies that you've invested today. And so that's why it's really important to understand what's going on here.
Right.
And so when I really take a look at why it's so important, just one more stat here before I get off my soapbox a little bit, but I might get back on it, is when we do look at all the silos, roughly half of the organizations, right? So this is B2B, and B2C goes up even more. I have it as a different cut. Have multiple customer and prospect data sources, right? They have ERP, CRM, SFA, marketing, email, data warehousing. Line of business doesn't quite understand it. They think they have less. IT knows they have the pain. And we still haven't solved the problem.
Yeah. You know, we talk with many companies that either have or are considering managing customer data and integrating that customer data using CDPs, as you said, or traditional MDM. And clearly, they're not working. You know, we work with one major global pharmaceutical company that had 57 legacy MDM instances, and they're now running exclusively on Reltio Connected Customer 360. So it's a challenge, clearly, because you've got a lot of great minds in different parts of the business trying to solve it, but it just has not been effective at this point. And part of it is, in addition to the silos, or related to the idea of having this important customer data in silos, there are a lot of criteria, attributes that need to be assigned in order to an individual in order to have that 360-degree view of a customer. And I should say entity rather than customer. It could be organization. But you know, you've got a slide where you talk about your view of requirements for a true 360-degree view of the customer, and it has 17 attributes. So why don't we overwhelm the audience with the data types that you feel are required?
Absolutely, right? So, you know, MDM has made the investments, as I saw earlier. CDP is trying to do that, but these 17 attributes, actually, I could even go higher than this. It's just they won't fit on the slide. So it really is all about understanding the operational data, the unstructured data, putting context to it, harnessing the power of data that's essential for businesses as they capitalize on improving that customer experience because of that pressure to deliver differentiated customer experience. So things like social posts and profiles, and you need that in real time. You can't be too delayed here anymore. Yeah, you might have real easy access to your product zones and your contact details, and you probably have access to your service requests, but you understand the relationship and the interactions. Are you able to infer demographics? Are you able to understand who's the influencer and get alerts based on life events? Right now, proximity and location events aren't quite as important, but they will be, and they can be in the future. So we need to plan for it because they were in the past, and we will get beyond this for the future. Understanding sentiment and then applying that across the customer journey. It really is all about aggregating and connecting insights to deliver a consistent and dynamic experience across the customer journey with the goal of achieving that differentiated view through the eyes of the customer and modifying your action and the interaction accordingly. And that's really difficult to do at scale because we've got these large volumes of data and insights that's going to be hidden. And it's making it a real challenge to target and serve these microsegments effectively. And so identifying and acting on those true signals from all the noise is really what everyone is shooting for. So these attributes and the ability to uncover that necessary insight is what's most important.
Yeah, makes sense.
And this is another slide that really shows why like CRM or MDM or CDP don't quite meet the needs of what the organization does today. And it's just a scenario based. So everyone talks about MDM and it really is that golden record. But an MDM for a confidence score of 78% when you're looking for the golden record, it's not going to work. It might work for marketing though. For customer service, you need a confidence score of 84% or 87%. You have to know you're confident when you're really talking to the customer. And so this is where when you use data synthesis and new machine learning and AI to connect more data points, using new matching technologies that are available today, that's really where the differentiation comes. And so this is where I call out different ways between your web data and your contact profile data and maybe information in customer service and chat and order management and your CSP to really identify things like negative sentiment changes and journey insight friction points. It goes back to those revenue opportunities and those metrics that I talked about early so that we can capitalize on the opportunity in real time. And so when we look at it, it really comes down to the role that machine learning can play. Not just here though, I'm gonna go over how information and action can really play with AI-enabled data matching, but it really is about reasoning to drive insights into multiple different perspectives. So the advancement in predictive machine learning intelligence built on a variety of different algorithms. Everyone asks me, what is the algorithm that you use? And I'm saying, well, there's multiple. It really depends on the use case and what you're trying to accomplish so that you're really getting that one-to-one capability. But it also includes data governance and synthesis and identity that powers that dynamic graph. And when you're linking this customer data and then the customer to some other unknown data with an optimized mixture of these matching techniques, that's what's absolutely essential. That's that more modern 360. And a data platform must make sure that they're able to do this in an intelligent way so that we are able to identify important trends and information for each customer. And so automated reasoning is absolutely really critical here, but we're going to go a little bit further when we come to machine learning and AI. But, you know, it really comes down to the use cases. And that's what we're really all here to talk about is what are digital leaders doing? And
yeah, you know, you've gotten us to the point where now we've got a very well-rounded 360-degree view of the customer. We've got the right attributes. We think we've got insight into who that customer is. One of the other things that in talking with some of our customers, and I'll take a guess that many in today's audience are not only thinking about where do they invest in order to get this customer insight, this connected customer data, but once they've got it, how do you allocate time and money against customer retention and increasing the lifetime value of your existing customers versus acquiring new customers? And I know that you talk with a lot of end users at many organizations across industries, and you know, today you're prepared to share with us some of what you've found in terms of how companies, especially the digital leaders, are striking that balance.
Yeah, so there's been a lot of hype on this whole customer acquisition. Customer acquisition is absolutely really important. But my data also talks to the fact that customer retention is actually the most important area that everyone is focusing on now. And what that is customer retention through the growth of excelling to existing customers, right? So this is where a lot of the models need to make sure that we're taking into account what's going on in real time, because the importance in customer retention is about using data in real time to understand today's actions, not just yesterday's actions, based off of models that may now be completely irrelevant based on the current economic situation. So the greater focus on selling to existing customers and customer retention will only increase as the importance of this seismic shift in growth strategies are happening. So with many businesses and consumers, things like subscription services are becoming extremely popular. And that changes the short-term economics and the long-term relationship with our customers. And it's really necessitating new business and engagement models with a stronger focus on loyalty and building that consistent interaction. So a key takeaway here is companies like telecom industry still, even in today, is focusing on customer experience while they might be focused on customer reduction, cost reduction, I mean, versus revenue growth. Most organizations today are really focusing on improving customer service retention and really improving the overall relationship. And all of that is very data driven. And so the next slide shows the difference between businesses that are digitally driven versus digitally delayed. So when we look at things like creating that real-time view of the customer across those disparate data sources, as you saw earlier, digitally driven organizations are saying 78% of them are really prioritizing. It's very important. They need to capture and analyze and understand and act on information. They're also using it to recognize patterns, right? That's where intelligent automation comes into play, so that they can comprehend ideas and plan and predict and solve problems in a scalable fashion. But they're also doing it in a very privacy first centric way. So they're looking at new technologies to address the rising needs of privacy concerns. So 82% are really looking at using a lot of this information to address regulatory compliance needs and approaching new ways of using data. And so this is where it's going to separate digital leaders from digital laggards and how it really fits into an overall strategy for the future.
Yeah, you know, and you talked earlier about the term data being the foundation for your digital transformation. And because in part, so much really relies on that data being accurate and being complete. And two of those areas, if you think about data-dependent downstream applications, are analytics and AI, which also are very critical if you are going to be operating at scale and want to be operating in real time. And I hope that everyone on this call is thinking about being in that place. So can you give us a little bit of perspective on where AI and analytics fit into your overall customer data strategy?
Absolutely, and I really do like to look at it again through digitally driven organization and digitally delayed. So in technology terms, executing on business transformation demands new investments in these new digital platforms. And so when we look at digitally driven organizations, they're having more advancement in use of machine learning models, and they're using it in production versus just one or two predictive models and just including some behavioral. So there's a maturity model here, and I have a whole maturity model that I can share with you on this. And so the other thing that we'd like to take a look at is where they are in understanding and using these models to improve the overall customer experience. So digitally driven organizations are more focused on using real-time algorithmic strategies across the entire customer journey versus just using it across individual departments. And so there is a huge difference here between digitally driven and digitally delayed. But what's most important is looking beyond just the data, but looking to the use cases. And so when we look at the use cases, we have to look at use cases by different departments and different industries, I mean. And so things like optimizing those customer experience friction points are really essential, even in healthcare today, because it really is about serving those customers. Even government, us, has to understand where they're trying to serve those customers. Regulatory compliance, very important here. And when we take a look at retail, they are really prioritizing that real-time unified view of the customer to improve retention and loyalty. And so businesses are really looking beyond the segment-based approach towards more algorithmic decision-making that enables what I call hyper-personalization at scale across all these use cases. Every single one of these are very personalization driven. And so it enables the ability to factor individual affinity along with overall intent. And that's what's resulting in greater relevancy and effectiveness. So a lot of marketers are really scaling so that they can auto adjust and adapt based on more than just one factor, a combination of factors. And that's what's really driving a well-planned approach between business and IT so that they have that innovative and digital culture through, and I'm going to say it one more time, to remain relevant into the eyes of your customer. And so really, this is what it's all about. And in order to do that, what I strongly recommend before we come to a close is it really is, yes, all about the data. So 92% are looking to have a platform that's unifying, that's front and center, right in the middle, smack, you can't miss it, about unifying business data to create more contextually relevant customer experience and how important that is. They're looking to make sure that they're using new data to enrich that experience and provide intelligence. So it's not just about the platform itself, it's about the intelligence that's driven off of it and doing it in real time. Right? So 83% of digital leaders are important. And while you can see the difference between 45% and 92%, it's really how I ask the question. So I do want to let you know that customer data intelligence platforms, that 45% was that number one. It was achieving that highest investment over the next 12 months, where the other two were more on a 1 to 10 scale. But it's really important. It's about data, it's about platform, it's about real-time intelligence.
Yeah, and you created this slide when I asked you to leave the audience with some concrete next steps that they should be taking in order to prepare or advance their digital transformation strategy, their plan moving forward. So these are the 3 areas that you recommend they focus on, beginning with unifying the platform, preparing yourself to operate in real time, and then enriching that data.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it really is all about the platform, the data, so that you do have that agility. Because if you always do what you always did, you will get what you always got. And I think everyone's trying to transform and do something different.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that is a great place to end. We are, we're pretty much on time, so we'll open it up to Q&A for a minute. But what I wanted to do is, if we can just go to the next slide. great, is just to bring it home and to connect it with what Reltio does. As I hope the audience sees it, we've laid out for you why data is so important, what the value is of having true connected customer data. And there are also multiple challenges. Certainly we talked about data silos. We talked about the volume and velocity of data and the importance of having insight-ready data so that you can take action on it. And that is really what we at Reltio are focused on doing with Reltio Connected Customer 360. And we have 6 steps that begins with getting that unified view of the customer. One of the 3 things that you just heard Cheryl say you really should be focused on right now. The second step is to enrich that data, to bring in third-party sources, all of your internal and external data. And that goes far beyond matching and merging and creating master profiles. Having that transactional data, that interaction data, understanding where people are spending, whether it's a business or an individual, how many transactions they've done, what those transactions look like, bringing in third-party data, like from our partner Dun & Bradstreet, credit data, for example. That is all absolutely critical information that goes beyond what legacy MDM is able to do for you. And then, the third step, and I'll go through this very quickly so we can leave time for Q&A, is really about relationships. And that is a real distinguishing factor for Reltio, is our ability to understand how a customer is related to a household, a product, an organization, and it gives you a much richer picture of who that individual is and where you may have cross-sell and upsell opportunities and where you may have new markets that you're able to go after. And then lastly, I'll finish off very quickly on these next 6 steps, because there's always an opportunity to go to our website or contact your account executive to learn more. But actionable customer insights. If this can't be used, then it's all for naught. So you're able to take data that's been prepared by Reltio and put it into Snowflake, for example, or put it into your analytics program, or feed your Lytics customer data platform with accurate, complete data, and then take action on that data through those platforms. The other point, compliance. So privacy and consent, really important. GDPR is an old story right now, but it's still around. The new story is the California Consumer Privacy Act. And although that's been buried by the healthcare news, certainly that's going to be coming back. The expectation is that we may see other states roll it out. And once more states begin to adopt their own privacy regulations, the federal government's going to follow behind that with one unified policy. So you've got to be ready for that. And then lastly, context. This came up a little bit earlier in the presentation. If you're not getting this data out to the users that need it, you're not doing your job completely. And different users are going to have different needs in terms of the data they need to access, how frequently, what permissions they have, and you can do all of that through Reltio. If you go to the next slide, ultimately by following these 3 steps, you'll have that connected customer experience. So that really just kind of sums things up. Also, here's my little commercial at the end. If we can go to that next slide, please. If Reltio Connected Customer 360 is something that you think can help accelerate your digital transformation, help you with hyper-personalization, bring you closer to your customers. We do have a promotion that's running right now. We can get you up and running in as few as 90 days for a fixed price. So, given the climate that we're in right now, we want to give clear visibility, no surprises. We want to get you up and running and being able to both manage through the situation that we're in right now and prepare for growth. Because again, I really believe the message I communicated earlier, which is, yeah, we can help fix problems, but we can also help you unlock opportunity. So with that said, let's open it up to questions. And I hope I don't mess this up, because it's the first time we're using Zoom for webinars, and I'm almost afraid to touch anything because we've been lucky so far.
I was the same thing. And by the way, I was the reason why I was giggling to your call is I was looking at some of the questions, and one question came in, and then I was thinking about my answer, and then he posted another question. That was my first use case of how we could handle it, and that's why I giggled. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. All right. Cool. So let's see. George has asked, in building the data platform, what are the top 5 steps to consider that are usually missed out?
Yeah, he also had a question on travel and the use cases and the customer service platform. And that was one of the things I was going to say is we're spending a lot of time talking about just the data and the platform and where it's trying to go and marketing and personalization. But one of the things we didn't really give a lot of detail on is that customer service automation and through the use of a conversational platform. And one of my reports that I wrote specifically on COVID was just that, and to understand how to use data to scale your response in more of an automated approach. And we missed that opportunity when we first launched out, and it drove down customer experience. We couldn't survive for that. We couldn't scale the approach. And I do think that we're able to potentially learn, I hope, learn from that experience and use and train models so that we can effectively tie together data and intelligent automation and using conversational platforms to at least help speed up some of the information to help the agents respond faster. So those are use cases that are going to come up. And then after that, it's really trying to understand that the models that you might have done in the past might not work. So we need to constantly retrain, and we have to rethink through what are the different elements of the data that we need for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we're a little bit over, but there's one and maybe 2 more questions that we could take. One I find intriguing is the audience member is asking to comment on the importance of real-time access of data for being data-driven, especially to the impact of customer experience during engagement. So where does real-time fit in? I think I've got my perspective, but I think I want to hear yours.
See, this is where I was trying to say, if you don't have the most up-to-date information, especially in a digital experience. So let's say someone's struggling online and they're reaching out to a chat online, which is where I'm seeing most of the engagement really wanting to go in a digital experience. And you can't really share a lot of that information because you might have siloed platforms. It's going to be a big fail because you're going to increase costs. They're not going to see what's going on. And you're not going to have the right information to, again, improve that cross-sell opportunity. You're not going to have the right information to make sure you're reducing friction points. So that's one area of real-time information is. And then the other area of real-time information is customer friction points during customer service. And the last thing you want to have to do if the customer's frustrated, you're not able to adapt to that sentiment, and you try to sell them something. Yeah, well, agents have their scripts, and unless you're able to then use that script in real time and modify based on the current situation, you're going to have a big fail. And so that's going to be a very strong disappointment, and the customer will leave.
Yeah, and it's in, there's the other application, or the other reason I should say, for needing to have real-time operations includes some, maybe routine things, but you touched on the lost opportunity of abandoned carts,
Yep.
right? So having real-time data, being able to serve up offers, for example, customized, hyper-personalized offers for an individual, or simply just being able to serve up products and options, going far beyond a recommendation engine, but you've got to have that basic block and tackle available. But the consumer part of the behaviors that we've seen now is not only is it at a very high level about being online, but the consumer still wants what they want when they want it. They're still impatient. They're still demanding, and you've got to be able to be there and meet those particular needs. And the only way to really do that is in real time, because if they leave, you may have some stats in the Charlotte, I'm not going to put you on the spot, but if they leave, there's a good unsatisfied, there's a very strong chance they're not going to come back. They're going to go
61%. I have a stat. 61%.
Nice.
This is not planned. He threw this one at me.
Wasn't a setup.
61%. They will not come back again if their online experience is subpar. Those aren't the exact words, but the stat is there.
Awesome. You're so good. You win the business information brief from 451 Research.
Thank you.
Which, by the way, I didn't mention that to the audience, but we did promise that we will share with you a business information brief that was written by one of Cheryl's colleagues, Paige Bartley, and it's really focused on how you use customer data to provide customer experience. And while across as industries, we asked her to really focus in on how customer experience can be used for businesses that are in truly commoditized or perceived to be commoditized spaces, like insurance or banking, for example. How do you stand out when it's an insurance policy that you're trying to sell? And experience is one way to do that. So we'll make sure my colleague Steve Carmen, who's been behind the scenes today, will make sure that everybody who is registered and attended today's webinar will get that research, which you cannot get anywhere else. So thanks everyone for joining today. Really appreciate it. Hope you found it helpful. We'd love to get your feedback. We'd also like to continue the conversation and talk more about how we can help you with your customer data strategy.